this will change, certainly, the debate. So much of it, as Latika correctly says, has been about President Biden. It's now shifted onto President Trump. And with what's going on in Milwaukee this week with the Republican National Convention, well, that will be looked at even more closely.
I think in this...
And I think the difference there is, Trump now gets martyr status. How have we reached an environment where Trump, the absolute villain of the Democratic eye, someone who should never be allowed back into power, is now both the martyr, the victim, and...
Latika, someone attempted to kill him. That's why he has this
exactly.
status.
But that's what I'm saying. So he now
but why is that a bad thing?
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm simply saying this is the dynamic he has now. He can go in with saying, I'm a martyr, I'm a victim, and I'm also the guy that was strong enough to overcome it all.
And all those things are true. All those things are true.
And I don't think we're in disagreement, Peter. I'm saying if you're a Democrat, this is nightmare scenario for you.
And also there's a responsibility, isn't there, for politicians in the US and indeed around the world just to calm the rhetoric down. Just reading some of the tweets which have been put out and some of the comments which have been made. Mike Collins is a congressman from Georgia. He tweeted, Joe Biden sent the orders. He added the Republican district attorney in Butler County, PA should immediately file charges against Biden for inciting an assassination. And we should also talk about J.D. Vance, who's an Ohio senator. He's one of the favourites to be Trump's vice presidential running mate. And he said, today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. We need to be careful, don't we, Peter, about what happens next.
Yes.
Tom Newton-Dunn spoke to us earlier. He was at the rally. He was talking about some people saying Biden sent the orders. This is down to CNN. And these were Trump supporters who were there at the time. Now, I appreciate it was the moments after people's adrenaline would have been going through the roof. They would have been frightened. But there is a moment now where people have a responsibility in what they say.
Well, this is a moment for political leadership, and this is a moment for cool heads, because if you react to this in a reasonable way, in a cool, calm way, then we avoid that sort of nonsense that you've just read out there from those people. I mean, that is the fact that, the thought for a second that President Biden had anything to do with this absolute conspiracy nonsense. The people who were shouting those things, emotions run high in that moment. I don't know what I would have said in that moment. I would probably not have recorded what I would have said in that moment because I've probably been panicking and swearing. So yes, it is incumbent on all political leaders to calm this down. And the two people who can calm this down most are President Biden, who's rightfully condemned this, and also President Trump, who can say this was the act of someone who clearly hated him, who wanted him dead. If he blames other people, that will be wrong unless there's any evidence that connects them to it. So I think, yes, this is a moment for leadership. And it's also a moment, I think, for people to say, yes, rhetoric, the nature of politics is something which is terrible, but the vast majority of people do not pick up a gun and want to kill someone. And that is, some would argue that that's the logical outworking of the nature of our political discourse. I don't. I would say you can have an argument with someone, you can, because that in some way explains it or excuses it. And I think we need to be really, really careful about that.
Latika, I particularly noticed when President Biden gave his response in a televised statement, normally he would talk about Trump or Donald Trump or former President Trump, but he actually just called him Donald. He said, I phoned Donald. And I thought it was quite interesting that he just personalised it and made it very clear that this was not about a presidential contender and an opponent. This was just about a human being. And I guess this all feeds into that responsibility.
Yes, and I think for the political class, they're so vulnerable and exposed. And I fully agree with everything that Peter Cardwell has said there. But I think it's also naive and optimistic because we're in a poisonous environment of social media where lots of comments and opinions are just running rampant. And we know that this exists already in a society where political violence has happened. It's happened recently, and it's a society that has access to semi-automatic weapons. So it's not a great environment to hope and wish, which of course we all do, that political leadership will lead to calm and cool responses in this scenario. But back to your point, Chloe, it's a good one. I think politicians understand innately that an attack on any one of them is an attack on all of them, because ultimately this is an attack on what the right to exercise democracy is. As Peter said at the start, whether you like or don't like Donald Trump, and I don't even think that qualification needs to be said in this context. It's just so clear that anybody standing for election should never have to be subjected to political violence. But unfortunately, it is a truism that this has happened, and it's set against an environment of increased political violence in both our countries, truly.
And also, it's fair to say, emotions are going to be running high. Adrenaline is going to be pumping through your body. I guess it's just an instant reaction. I doubt that Trump planned that or ever thought if this happens. You do what happens in the moment, I would have thought.
Yeah. I mean, disappointingly unpopular opinion, but the guy's just been shot. Can we give him a bit of a break here?
But I'm actually not observing this as a criticism, good or bad. What I'm reflecting on is this guy's political instincts are incredible. He knows exactly how to seize that moment. He understands. Trump is a visual guy. He understands the power of the image, and he created the image that will go down in time as defining. That's more what I'm saying here. What this does is it really just crystallizes a very big contrast, the strength that Trump will now be able to portray and the weakness and the ailing and frailty that Biden has been displaying. I just think it all brings it into a lot sharper contrast. I think there's obviously only one way that the Democrats can respond to this, which is to say political violence is unacceptable and we condemn it in every which way and every single form.
Both parties, their supporters and Trump, are going to be angry. The responsible thing to do is to try to lower the temperature. The history of Donald Trump in basically every situation is that he doesn't lower the temperature, and I expect he probably won't in this. But also, as I was once told as a young journalist, you don't need to sensationalise a story that's sensational already. All he has to do is tell the facts. An attempt has been made on his life. An attempt has been made to kill him. That's what people know. That's what people have seen. It was in public. The footage is there. We've now all seen it many times. And
it's
that
the way
will continue
he uses that
day.
information, isn't it? It's the way he uses that. And if he uses it for obvious political gain, if he tries to whip up conspiracy theories, or if he just goes straight down the line. And that will be what's really interesting to observe Donald Trump in the days and weeks and indeed months ahead.
And the thing is, he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to.
But that doesn't stop him in the past.
That's true.
And
that's
that
true.
is
Yeah.
that is the point.
Although I would draw your attention to how restrained Trump has been on Biden in the last few weeks. Trump has not been stirring the pot, and he could have very, very easily. But what we've seen is a very, very rare exercise in restraint from Trump. He has barely said a word, and he's just let Biden and the Democrats and their mess speak for itself. And it's been hugely, hugely effective, hasn't it? And his polling has only gone up. So I actually think for the first time we are seeing a very different sort of Trump. And if he applies that restraint to this, it is the test of it, and it's going to be fascinating to watch. But I do think we do have a bit of a precedent here for a change sort of behaviour from Trump.
That's a fascinating point from Latika, which makes absolutely perfect sense. He almost doesn't have to do anything. He can just let people react. And actually, if you go back a few weeks to the debate, very few people can remember really very much that Donald Trump said in that debate. It's all about Biden. And it is that political rule that when your opponent is losing, don't interrupt them.